Have you ever stopped to reflect on the impact of a life that pleases God so much that he decides to spare it from death? The story of Enoch, an ordinary man who lived in an extraordinary way with God, leads us to a deep reflection on what it means to walk with the Lord. In a time when people were turning away from God, Enoch stood out. He lived 365 years, a life shorter than many of his contemporaries. But this number alone is not the most important. What truly matters in the story of Enoch is that he was taken by God without experiencing death. But what made Enoch so special? Why did God choose him in such a unique way? Let's explore in detail the story of Enoch and learn from him how to live a true, transformative faith. In this video, we will deeply analyze Enoch's life, understand what it teaches us about closeness to God, faith, and how we can apply these lessons in our walk with Christ. Get ready to see the story of Enoch not as something distant and outdated, but as a living example of how we can live faithfully and transformatively today. Enoch appears in the Bible within a genealogical context that connects Adam to Noah in Genesis 5. He was the son of Jared and the father of Methuselah, the man who lived the longest in Bible history with an incredible 969 years. But longevity is not what defines the story of Enoch. What truly highlights Enoch is his life experience with God. He lived 365 years, and the Bible says something remarkable about that period. Enoch walked with God, and he was no more, because God had taken him. Genesis 5:24. This brief phrase carries an enormous weight. Walking with God is not an empty expression. It doesn't just mean doing good deeds or following religious rules. It means a continuous, intimate, and transformative relationship with the Creator. And Enoch didn't just know God by hearsay. He walked with him day after day in a constant and personal way. This walk with God was not something sporadic or superficial, but a daily choice that shaped his entire life. The question for us is, are we walking with God like that? Enoch lived in a time when the world was drifting away from God, with corruption and violence growing around him. But Enoch chose to live differently. His faithfulness to God in times of crisis is a challenge for all of us. We live in an increasingly distant world from God, but like Enoch, we have the option to live in close communion with him. The expression walked with God appears in other parts of the Bible, but in relation to Enoch, it is deeply significant. Walking with God is not just about doing what God commands. It is about having a relationship of friendship, trust, and obedience. It means listening to God's voice and making his will our priority. But this doesn't happen automatically. Walking with God requires continuous effort, a willingness to live in his presence, and making choices that please him. Imagine what your life would be like if you truly walked with God in every moment. Not just praying or going to church, but making his presence a constant reality in your mind, your choices, and your actions. Walking with God implies a daily decision to live in his will, to let him guide your steps, and to be willing to make personal sacrifices to please him. Enoch did this for 300 years. Enoch did not live a fleeting life of faith. He walked with God, and through that, he also gained a deep experience with him. This doesn't mean he was perfect, but it means his pursuit of God was genuine and constant. This challenges us to reflect. Has our faith been like that? A constant pursuit of God's presence, even amidst the distractions and difficulties of the world? The most impressive moment in the story of Enoch is his rapture. The Bible says God had taken him. He was taken to heaven without experiencing death, one of the few times in the Bible this happens. Death, the natural end of all, did not happen to Enoch. God spared him from this process, taking him directly into his presence. What does this teach us? First of all, the story of Enoch reminds us that God has control over life and death. He is sovereign, but it also teaches us that faithfulness to God can have an eternal impact. Enoch was taken because his life of faith and devotion pleased God so much that he called him to be with him in a special way. This challenges us to think about how we are living. If God looked at your life today, would he say, This person walks with me so intimately that I am ready to take them directly to me? Or on the contrary, are we so distant from him that we have yet to find that deep connection? Enoch challenges us to live with such intensity in our faith that our relationship with God becomes a priority in our life. And his rapture gives us a vision of hope. God has the power to transform our reality and take us into his Enoch presence. Is remembered as a hero of faith. The Bible tells us that by faith, Enoch was taken so that he did not experience death. He was a man of radical faith, someone who believed so deeply in God that his life reflected that in all his actions. Enoch's faith was not just theoretical. It was not an empty faith, but a practical one. He lived according to what he believed every day, every aspect of his life. His faith was visible in his obedience to God, in his constant pursuit of his presence. No matter what happened around him, Enoch was determined to walk with God. His faith sustained him for 300 years. This teaches us that faith is not something we do occasionally. It must be the foundation of our life. Our faith must be visible, active, and transformative. Like Enoch's faith, it should be something that shapes our choices, our attitudes, and even our view of the future. Faith is not just about believing. It is about living according to what we believe. Enoch also left a prophetic legacy. In the book of Jude 1:14-15, we find a prophecy from him that speaks of the judgment that will come upon the wicked. He prophesied that the Lord will come with thousands and thousands of his saints to judge everyone and convict the wicked of all the ungodly acts they have committed. Enoch not only lived by faith but also proclaimed the truth of God. This prophecy calls us to reflect on how we live in relation to the future. Enoch reminds us that even though God's justice has not yet been fully carried out, it will come. And when it arrives, there will be no doubt about God's justice. Enoch challenges us to live with a vision of an eternal future where we will all be responsible for our choices before God. Enoch's legacy is an example of radical faithfulness. He walked with God in such a deep way that his life became an eternal testimony. His story challenges us to live intentionally and radically committed to God. Enoch did not expect perfect circumstances to live his faith. He lived in a world of increasing wickedness and violence, but he was not affected by it. He continued his walk with God, faithful to him at all times. Enoch is proof that no matter how difficult the world around us is, we can always choose to walk with God. Enoch's life teaches us that we can live deeply and intimately with God, and that true faith is one that does not conform to circumstances, but remains steadfast in the constant pursuit of God's presence. Enoch was not perfect, but he walked with God in such a sincere and constant way that he became a model for all of us. Now I ask you, how is your walk with God? Have you been living in a way that reflects his will and his presence in your life? If you want to walk closer with God, start today. Take that step of faith. If you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And leave in the comments how you can apply the life of Enoch to your own walk of faith. May God bless your journey.